Welcome to this week's Supply Chain News Digest, brought to you by Masters of Supply Chain. I am your host for this week, David Warrick, and I am joined by my good friend, Bill Hurles. Bill, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Glad to join you.
So, Bill, it just amazes me. You spent 38 years at General Motors. That is just unbelievable. That to me feels like two careers. Tell me a bit about how life is in retirement.
Well, it's exciting. I'm doing a lot of traveling. My wife and I enjoy being able to visit many of the places I visited under work, conditions, and now going as a tourist has been a lot of fun. And we're spending time doing that, and also helping support our 7 granddaughters. So it's wonderful having time to be focused and enjoy family.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, it's great to hear that. And as always, there's absolutely always a life after retirement. I'm going through my second stint right now, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. But there's a lot happening in supply chain this week. We can't really lift a newspaper or open a blog without somebody mentioning tariffs. Now, in particular, the automotive industry has been going through a lot of turmoil, over the last couple of months as tariffs have been brought to the fore. As a supply chain leader, what's happening in automotive right now? How are supply chain leaders really tackling this problem, and what's going through their minds?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, but at the same time, I would bring up it's also an opportunity. And I think there's been a focus in the automotive industry over the last few years to really regionalize their supply base. And obviously, we know from our expertise in supply chain, the closer the supplier can be, obviously, the lower potentially your logistics costs can be, and your faster response. So directionally, I believe the industry has been moving in many of the areas that need to be focused on as a reaction to the tariffs. But we got to be aggressive. And I think, as I think about my old role, if I was sitting in my chair, I always like to establish some ground rules. Okay, what are the boundaries that I really want to stay within and establish? And one is I want to avoid price increases on my parts. Okay, I say, how can I offset the impact of tariffs so that at the end of the day, I'm minimizing the impact of my components on my total cost. The second ground rule is I want to stay with my supply base. I don't really want to explore getting away from, I shouldn't say explore. Some cases you're going to need to, but I don't want to jump to resourcing immediately. I want to stay focused, working with my supplier. Obviously, that has huge potential ramifications on quality and delivery, the partnership that you've established with them. I think back to when we went through the bankruptcy for General Motors in 2011. We really focused on maintaining those supplier commitments. And post bankruptcy, what I really saw was that built a very, very strong relationship and paid benefits I had not even anticipated. But the supplier saw that we worked to work with them, stay with them, and work through what the difficulties are. So that's the second parameter that I would try to really focus on. And then the third is really dig into your supply base. Most automotive OEMs today and major manufacturers have been working on mapping their supply base, tier 1, but really getting into tier 2 and tier 3. That's going to be paramount in being able to make sure you know where you've got your exposure. So those are the 3 things that I would stay very focused on initially.
Right, those are great points, Bill. And I want to go back to the concept of this being an opportunity. So we always say never let a good crisis get in the way of innovation. And unfortunately in supply chain, that tends to happen more often than not. But it is an interesting concept in terms of whenever a supply chain is forced to think in a different way, we tend to be very good at actually being innovative. And so, for a company like General Motors, Is that part of the DNA? Is that part of the thought process as well in terms of looking at it? And yes, it's hard, it's difficult. We need to find ways to be able to combat these challenges, but ultimately it leads to a groundbreaking, innovative thought process, which actually lifts the supply chain to a new level.
Yeah, I agree. I think an example is complexity reduction. When you look at automotive and when you look at many, I'd say heavy manufacturers, you have a lot of part numbers that have very low usage. And they take up space, they cost money, they're holding inventory, they got low turn rates, et
Right.
cetera, et cetera. And as you really try to minimize your impact on tariffs, looking at your low volume parts and what are parts that realistically I could eliminate. They're providing marginal benefit to my customer, and it's just an added potential impact that I can try to avoid. So that's an area as you look at that, and
Yeah.
by doing that, in some cases, while you get rid of a low running part, it also offers the opportunity to increase a higher running part, which is a positive to your supplier because increased volume generally increases revenue and obviously potential profit. So that's an area that I would be focusing on. And okay, as we're working through these parts that have exposure, what can we do? And then I think the other part is working with the suppliers to multi-tool their capability. Most large suppliers today have regionalist presence all over. In some cases, they're producing parts out of maybe initial convenience or plan, and this may be a catalyst to move the parts closer to point of use. And so there's another one, and that can be a win-win for both organizations in the end. So that's another area I would see as an opportunity.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of opportunity around this concept of build to order versus build to
Yep.
stock,
Yep.
but also, with some of the latest technologies, the ability to actually 3D print some of those parts on demand, as opposed to the traditional, model of holding inventory. And I think we're going to see more of that, become, prolific in the industry over the next few years as the technology continues to ramp up. I think that I'm intrigued by your point of relationships with suppliers, because I think in the first instance, a lot of the advice in the industry was, tariffs are hitting, you need to go back and negotiate with your supply base. But those relationships are incredibly important. And to your point, going through a bankruptcy where there's a lot of doubt and there's a lot of pressure, but maintaining those relationships actually for you bore a lot of fruit coming out the other side.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, building those relationships in times of crisis are actually really important, because it does bring that element of stability. A lot of companies right now are looking at different sourcing options. They're thinking, okay, I need to go to a more tariff-friendly country. But to your point, in a global supply chain, there's multiple nodes and there's multiple opportunities to be able to actually leverage an existing network and do something else. How did you go about that? How do you build those great relationships with your suppliers?
I think it starts with communication. I think being, number one, communicating what your intent is extremely important. Don't hold the cards too close to your chest, so suppliers uncertain of what you plan to do, and that can be volume, it can be timing, it can be engineering change communication, but it starts with communication, and then second is listening. Having two-way communication that suppliers feel open in providing input. In some cases, that input may not be things that are necessarily favorable to what you're trying to resolve. That might be availability, it might be timing, it might be price. But I think it's really important to be able to have two-way communication here and listen to the suppliers and ask for their input. What can we do? What are some of the ideas you have versus dictating and mandating? And then I think the third is trust. Do what you say, do it when you say you're going to do it, avoid surprises. I think those three things are paramount at both establishing, improving, and growing supplier relationships.
No, fantastic. And so if we switch to the downstream supply chain from the upstream supply chain, what happens in, with the dealership network at this time? So, there's reports every day about we're going to start seeing empty shelves. We're going to start to see, a shortage of products. But in the automotive industry, that lends itself to, cars on the lot, cars in the showroom. Is my choice going to be available? Am I trying to buy to beat the tariff? What does the dealership network feed back? Because I think about that as a direct comparative to how retailers react with some of the bigger suppliers. So what is that? How does that communication flow right now? And how does a company like General Motors just present calm through that dealer network?
Yeah, there's very, very close communication that takes place between the dealer network and I'll call it the OEM production. At the end of the day, the customer has to come first.
Right.
I mean, a decision that we would always make if it meant building a new vehicle or repairing one in the field, the vehicle in the field that customer needs to be taken care of first. And so uh, I think the dealers, number one, they're able to share parts across the network. They've got great visibility of where parts and I would anticipate, not being in my old chair today, I would anticipate there's a lot of focus going on what is the anticipated demand for parts. The location of the supplier is known, so you can
Right.
anticipate what the tariff impact is, if any. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some buffering going on at a higher level with the uncertainty that you have right now. That's a third strategy, and again, that's kind of a win-win both for the customer but also for the supplier to carry, in some cases, a bit more inventory, and I would say also really watching your trend, what your usage is. You have seasonal trends that take place, especially for body shop type parts that are prone more, during winter conditions to needing to be replaced. But really paying attention to the details. AI provides a lot of forecasting capability, and I'm no expert
Right.
in AI, but I would anticipate the organizations are using some of those capabilities to bolster appropriate inventory to protect their customers and their virgin builds.
I mean, no, I think it's a great point, and it's great insight in terms of that flow of communication, both upstream and downstream, has become more important than ever, especially in a time of crisis, and layering in that level of calm. So, you're highly sought after in the industry. People love your opinions. You advise for a lot of companies. What are you telling leaders right now? What are you telling supply chain leaders? My perspective is, I'm saying to people, hurry up and wait, but be prepared to act quickly. Because I think while there's still so many things moving and there's so many, changing parts on a daily basis, depending on the latest tweet, it's a little bit foolhardy to make an instant knee-jerk decision. And so I'm saying, there's a time to take a breath, and that's a good time. But don't be complacent. Be prepared to act quickly, because whenever the next decision happens, you're still going to be impacted. How are you talking to different leaders today?
Yeah, the same way. I think maintaining flexibility is extremely important. I think the other part as a leader is to recognize you're going to make some decisions that later on you may say, "I wish we would have went a different direction," and I think you need to create an environment or maintain an environment with your workforce that we're going to have to take some risk. We're going to make some decisions that we probably not maybe regret, but recognize I could have done different because the facts will change. It's extremely fluid, but taking no action at all is the worst thing to do. You need to take action. You need to take the facts that are in front of you, the opportunities that exist, and move forward. Keep moving that ball down the field is extremely important. And keep positive. Keep your crew motivated, because there's a lot of uncertainty. People are thinking about, am I going to have a job? What's going to happen to the company? As a leader, you need to maintain and motivate your employees and give them confidence that you're with them and that we're going to work our way through this and we're going to be better in the end.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think, the sun will come up tomorrow. This is all cyclical. It will revert to some level of calm, hopefully,
Yeah.
at some point in the near future, and and we can all get back to being innovative and busy today. But, back to our original point, I do think that it's an interesting time for supply chain. I
Yeah.
think that it's a time that we can really start to embrace some of the technological advances and start to future-proof our supply chains a little bit better. And I got asked this question last week, and was have supply chains been complacent since COVID? And my answer is I think maybe yes. I think it's we're supply chain practitioners are very in the now. They are very much around solving the problem that's directly ahead of them. And so when we get busy again, we tend to not spend as much time thinking about the preparation that we should be putting in place for future events. And I think that we learned a lot through the COVID years, and we maybe didn't act enough. And so this is another, if you like, another gray swan. And we need to learn from it, and we need to make sure that we are actually embedding some of these technological advances into our future supply chain so that we're prepared for the next wave. I don't know how you feel about that.
Absolutely. David, I go back to risk and resiliency, and you need to be continuing to anticipate what could change and what could we do, and make sure that you're looking at all sourcing decisions with resiliency in mind. And we're going to continue to have earthquakes. We're going to continue to
Right.
have all kinds of different disruptions that are going to occur in your supply base over the world. So, building in resiliency into how you approach the suppliers, how you select the suppliers, how you locate your suppliers, is paramount. And I think you bring up a good example of what happened with COVID. We saw not only the workplace change, which then led to process changes, but also our approach towards the business and the ability for the organizations to stay flexible, and got to keep building it. But there always is that tendency to have a little bit of a lull once you come out of that
Yeah.
crisis. And as a leader, you got to make sure you continue to grow your organization and grow your skill set.
Bill, great advice. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, really love the conversation. You've been watching the Masters of Supply Chain Weekly News Digest. If you
Yes,
like us, give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel. If you don't like us, please leave us a comment and we'll do what we can to change. Thank you so much for joining.
thanks, David. Take care.